Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 164 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 20 of A Storm of Swords, that's Cat 3.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll be particularly helpful if you're not reading along. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
I'm well. I played soccer twice yesterday.
Wow.
2 games of soccer.
Boy.
So
I went to a soccer game yesterday.
Get out!
I did, only for a half, because Stacy was with me. and it was nearing PJ's time.
Nearing wine o'clock.
Yes, exactly. Good friends of ours. Their son is a senior at the high school, and it was senior night, and so we went to support him and cheer him on, and it was a lot of fun. It was supposed to be like a really important game to win like our conference, and the winner of this game was going to win the conference. But within like 5 minutes, we were up 3-0, and we were up 5-0 by the half, and then we left, and it became a stalemate, and it ended 5-0. But we were like, wow, was not expecting this to be such a laugher.
Yeah. I will say to our non-American listeners that I don't know what senior night means either, so I can't help you with that. It's fine. Don't bother explaining. I think we're perfectly happy with our ignorance.
Last home game for a senior in high school.
Because a senior in high school will never play for them again.
Right.
So I see. Oh, that makes a lot of sense, actually, now you've said it. I believe we've used the platform to lay into Ryan Reynolds, is that right? We have started a feud to which he's yet to rise to the bait. Yes?
I just mentioned that I wasn't sure. I felt like there was a lot of acting going on in the documentary, is all.
Yes. It wasn't that. It was the fact that he is financially supporting a rival to my
Oh,
team.
Yes, that too. Yes,
that's my
yes.
issue.
Right.
I don't care about how fake the documentary is.
Right.
However, I just got a text from my sister. The Oldham are playing Wrexham.
Oh.
My team is playing Ryan Reynolds' team.
How exciting.
On Sunday of next week, and it's going to be on ESPN.
No way.
Yes.
We need to get the word out.
I know. That's crazy.
Will this episode be out in time, or do we have to?
I don't think it will. I think it will have already happened. But,
we have to go to the social medias and announce this.
It's not on ESPN. It's on one of their streaming things.
Right. Okay, sure.
I am actually going to. I don't have access to that, but I'm going to for that weekend. Let me tell you. So Thank you, Ryan Reynolds. You have brought me great joy. As long as Wrexham lose, you've brought me great joy.
We'll backtrack everything we've said.
Yeah. You can join Jason Momoa. You can tag team with him.
Well, why are we...
People who are going to beat up Simon and Mackelly.
Why are we making enemies of such... not just powerful people in the sense that like they're rich and famous, but physically powerful people.
Exactly. That's Aquaman and Deadpool.
Right. We got to rethink this plan here. Well, I got a text yesterday from my dentist. That was actually 2 days ago, saying the text, I just said the beginning of it because I couldn't see the whole text. It just said, dentist appointment tomorrow. And I thought to myself, because I am like the family keeper of schedules, I thought to myself, I wonder who in the family it is that has this dentist appointment. Can't possibly be me. I just had one. And sure enough, it was me. And I thought, oh my gosh, I am at the point in my life where I am counting the passage of time by dental cleanings. That's how quickly life is going.
Life is racing by so fast.
Right. When dental cleanings, which are 6 months apart, when they're going by and you think, I just had one, and 6 months have gone by already. That's when you know you're officially old, I guess.
Yes. Or working too hard, Mackelly.
Well, yes. Well, we know it's not that. So it's got to be the old. Well, I gotta say, we just took about a 10-minute break here in the show to discuss things that
that aren't interesting to anyone but us. Hey, when has that ever stopped?
Right,
us?
We were talking about people's birthdays and who's doing this and that. So hopefully this is not too much of a break back in here.
Yes, that wouldn't even make the outtakes. It was not interesting at all.
Right, it would be about 5 people who care about the things we were just talking about.
Well, let's get down to business then.
Let's do it.
How did we leave Catelyn Stark? Last we saw of Cat, she was learning that her idiot offspring had married the first girl who gave him the time of day. Like any mum would be, she's not exactly thrilled. But factor in the slight aimed at the Freys, she's absolutely furious.
Uh-huh.
Freys were seen leaving Riverrun and trampling on Stark banners as they left. Her new in-laws, the Westerlings, sworn bannermen of House Lannister no less, seem a bit dazed by the whole thing, and Grey Wind does not like them and so has been banished to the doghouse. Cat left us with the idea that someone might be able to bring the Freys back into the fold. We weren't quite sure who she meant.
Right.
Mackelly, why don't we give them the summary of this one?
I could tell you were in a chipper mood when you wrote that recap. It had.
I was in a chipper mood, yes. I was just thinking, I was putting myself in Cat's shoes, and I was thinking about what Robb did. And I was like, teenage boys!
Let's see if the summary reads as chipperish, or chipperly? I don't know. We'll see. So Cat and the rest of Robb's court have been summoned in the middle of the night to the Riverrun throne room. 2 bodies are laying on the floor, wet from the rain, pale-skinned from long imprisonment, but contrasted by the bright red of their wounds. They're teenage boys, Willam Lannister and Tion Frey. Now, this definitely doesn't have a chipper ring to it here.
Well, I mean, you've got to consider the source material.
Right,
it's hard
yes.
to be chipper about this.
Not something you can easily write in a chipper way. Both captured at the Battle of the Whispering Wood, now murdered, Willam, seemingly in his sleep, but by the defensive wounds, Tion died in terror.
A crowned Robb has the small John Umber bring in the prisoners. His father, the great John, leads them in. The assembled lords step back and look away to avoid the taint of treason, but Cat notices how alike captors and captives appear, big, hairy northern warriors. Robb asks if 5 is the correct number. Umber confirms that there were 8, but 2 were slain and 1 is dying from his wounds. Robb asks if it took 8 to murder 2 unarmed squires.
Edmure points out that 2 of his men were also murdered to get to the prisoners. Rickard Karstark speaks first. It was not murder. Anyone who gets between a father and his vengeance asks for death. Robb offers that neither child killed Karstark's sons, who died with honor in battle. They died, counters Rickard. Robb demands that Karstark look upon the dead children. But unbowed, Karstark demands that Cat look on them. She's as much to blame as he is.
Not her treason, says Robb. Is it treason to kill Lannisters, but not to free them? Counters Karstark. Umber and Karstark get to blows until the farrago is interrupted by the arrival of the Blackfish. Karstark's accomplices are to be hung, even the dead ones, with the Lord himself held until Robb returns. He needs to speak with his great-uncle Brynden. The thunder and lightning create an epical air to the whole proceedings.
It really does. Brynden's news is grim. The Karstarks have left. Rickard has promised the hand of his daughter to whoever finds Jeyne, and they've scattered to hunt. And they're not coming back. Edmure wants the news of the murders contained, but the Karstarks know, and soon the 7 Kingdoms will. Edmure suggests pardoning Rickard, a suggestion that goes down rather poorly. Robb decries how bad their position has become. The Freys aren't talking. The neck is in enemy hands. No response from Sir Roderick, and Auntie Liza won't respond. All he wants to do is march his army through the Bloody Gate to take ships back to the north. No chance.
Robb moans that he has to kill a loyal friend to avenge his enemies. Edmure again petitions for clemency, but Robb is committed. At dawn, in the Godswood, Robb beheads Rickard Karstark after some final harsh words. Cat doesn't see her blood-spattered firstborn for the rest of the day. The bad news keeps coming. Lord Hoster is at death's door. That evening, Queen Jeyne pays Cat a visit. The young queen doesn't know how to comfort Robb. Cat empathizes. She too married a taciturn northern lord. She doesn't have much practical advice, but suggests patience.
And also getting pregnant. Jeyne assures her mother-in-law they're doing everything in their power to make that happen. And I felt like there was maybe a little TMI in that revelation as well, when she talking about the amount of times per day that they are trying.
True, but I think Cat really opened the door to the TMI by saying it in the first place.
Jeyne reckons it will be twins, Eddard and Brandon. Even Cat's calloused heart is touched. It's rare that I end a summary.
Yes, we usually try and sort of like bat it back and forth, but
yes, and usually
sometimes it just works out that way.
Yeah. Mix things up, keep it fresh,
Yeah. So I mean, overall, I would say the bitter seeds that Cat sowed when she freed Jaime have ripened to particularly bitter fruit.
Yes.
The cause has not only lost one of its chief lieutenants and his considerable force, but also its moral authority. I mean, you could perhaps wash your hands of the atrocities that Roose Bolton seems to be perpetrating, but this was under your nose,
right.
And it was the murder of innocents, basically.
Yeah. And, aside from executing one of his own top people here, we're also seeing how hard it is to play the good guy in war. He talks about, when he's talking to his family, how he promised himself when they were chanting the King in the North that he was going to be honorable and good and, gracious to his people and brave toward his enemies. And, now he's so befuddled and confused about the whole thing. And, we talked about Sansa's poor treatment at the hands of the Lannisters at the Red Keep. And we assumed that the Stark highborn captives were faring better, but this certainly destroys that argument.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think they were to a certain extent right up until they got murdered.
Right.
Because, I mean, they weren't torturing and sort of emotionally abusing these kids.
Yes.
They were just holding them prisoner.
Right. And I'll point out, because it's only a quick reference, it's a one-word reference in this chapter, they were held in a tower cell, not in a dungeon. Edmure mentions that the Karstarks killed 2 of his men to get into the tower.
Right.
So, it's Jaime was held in a tower cell prior to the escape, and then they threw him in the darkest, dankest dungeon. So, yeah, they didn't have the boys down there with the rats. And
yeah. I also think that partly that, I mean, I think that it makes sense. They're highborn. They would be considered prestige prisoners, and therefore keeping them in the tower over the dungeon makes sense. But it also, I think, it didn't escape George Martin's attention that this would be very similar to the children murdered by Richard III.
Oh.
That story. He, I think, was the uncle to 2 boys who were the heirs to the throne. And he kept them hostage in the Tower of London and then had them murdered so that he would have a free path to the throne.
Oh, goodness.
And so I think there's distinct parallels here. Of course, it's not for the same reason, but I think we were supposed to see a sort of similarity.
Sure.
It was done on purpose.
Yeah. I hate to sound like a broken record, but...
Well, this is episode 164, Mackelly.
That's true.
It's hard not to at this point.
Rickard Karstark put his son in harm's way. If he wanted them to be kept safe, leave them at home or have kept them with Cat and the men that were keeping Cat safe out of the way of the battle. I also wonder about this whole thing. Would he have done the same if the Lannisters were still holding his son Harrenhal at Harrenhal? Because the Starks believe they have 2 daughters being held by the Lannisters. If Rickard had his oldest son Harrenhal held by the Lannisters, would he have killed these kids knowing that likely would have meant the death of his oldest?
Yes, I would presume not, but I mean, I think it goes to the sort of the times, I mean, this is a time when the Northern Lords were expected to fight, and they're expected to have sons who are men full grown at the age of 7, and
especially in the North.
exactly for the Northern Lords, and so they'll just it would be unconscionable to tell your teenage sons to stay with Cat during the battle.
Yeah, but
he just couldn't do it, and then but the thing is, you're hidebound by convention to put them in harm's way, but that doesn't tell you what your reaction's going to be if they get killed.
Right.
You know, he is a father, and
yes.
he could be mad with grief. I mean, he clearly
Absolutely.
is making horrible decisions,
Yep.
but it's hard to completely blame him when he's been through something so awful.
It is. It clearly set off a descent into madness that ended in this chapter with his death, the death of 7 of his men, and these 2 boys.
Yeah. And Edmure's 2 men as well.
Oh, yes.
Edmure's keen to point out.
Yes.
And Edmure points out that that's a genuine murder because they had nothing to do with anything. They were just guarding the prisoners.
Yeah, right.
But, I mean, Karstark's argument is that anyone who gets between a man and his vengeance is, it's not murder. It was bringing it upon themselves. But
their job is to guard that tower.
Yeah.
You know, they're just doing their job.
I mean, there's just lots of sympathy to go around here. I mean, and the other thing is, I mean, Cat can't escape. I mean, Rickard Karstark is throwing blame around, but Cat can't really escape it.
Oh, yeah, right.
He had a chance of revenge when Jaime was held, you know. Jaime could have been tried and put to death for his crimes. But when she freed Jaime, she robbed him of that. And like you said, once his own son was no longer captive, then he was free to do something.
Seek his revenge however he could, yeah. So Robb also, he says that when Rickard Karstark he killed these boys, he killed more than just the boys, he killed his honor. And, you know, there's some... When those boys surrendered in battle, which Robb points out they did, when they put their swords down, and Robb accepted their surrender, there's a certain level of honor to uphold the surrender, that you won't just kill them in the night.
Yeah. At the very least, I would think, you know.
Right, not a trial or anything. While they're sleeping, just sneak in and kill them. So when Rickard breaks that honor and kills them without Robb's command, Robb could certainly make the argument that you killed Robb's honor as well here.
Yeah. And Robb makes the very rational point that Karstark's own sons died honorably on the battlefield with swords in their hands. These boys were murdered in their sleep. And
right.
There's, you know, Karstark says that they're related to Jaime, and so they're of his ilk. Blood pays for blood, but it's the worst possible example of an eye for an eye. You know?
Yes. It's an eye for your nephew's eye, you know?
Right.
I mean, it's
right.
Your cousin's eye, I guess it would be.
So Rickard, you know, tries to pull Cat down with him. He says, you know, when Robb insists that Karstark behold the 2 bodies, he says, you know, tell your mother to look at them. She slew them as much as I did. And I mean, I think we perhaps have a slightly different opinion on this. I think I'm of the opinion he's got a point. You're more of the opinion one of these people murdered those boys and one didn't.
Yeah, you're right. She did not slew them as much as Rickard Karstark did. He, of his own free will, went in there and killed these 2 boys who had nothing to do with anything. You can't absolve yourself by saying, she made me do it. You know, that's a pretty weak argument, in my personal take.
But she also knew at the time that she did it how it would be received by the Northern Lords.
Yes, she did. Yes.
So maybe she didn't know this particular thing would happen, but she did know that she was seriously jeopardizing the Northern Alliance.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's worse in many ways.
Yeah, you're right.
It's more of a betrayal, you know.
I mean, the Karstarks leaving without killing the boys would have been bad enough. Like if they just said, nope, I'm done. We're out of here.
Right.
That might have been an expected consequence. I don't think Cat could have seen that these 2 boys would be, you know, caught up in all this. But, you know, it made me wonder, would Rickard have not tried to kill or harm Jaime himself if Jaime hadn't been free? Maybe Rickard was going to find a way to get his vengeance. And if Cat hadn't freed Jaime, he was going to get down into that dungeon and kill Jaime.
Yeah, it's. I mean, in some respects, better Jaime than the two innocent boys. You know?
Definitely, because at least it's the person who was directly involved. And remember, like, even that, it was very early. It was the first cat chapter of A Clash of Kings. Might have been one of, like, the first 3 chapters or so, when Robb announced what his demands were going to be to Sir Cleos to take the King's Landing. When he mentioned that Jaime would be held, and he wasn't even saying, I'm going to trade Jaime for this person or that person. He was saying, Jaime's going to be held until a time when I deem fit to release him.
Right.
Rickard Karstark stormed out of the throne room. So nothing short of Jaime's death was going to appease him.
But, I mean, there were things that might have. For example, he might have had single combat with him. Oh. Something like that. Let the gods decide. I mean, so, and that wouldn't have lost the Karstarks necessarily.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, because Rickard would have entered into it. He probably would have lost.
Would have lost, yeah.
But he would have willingly entered into it himself. But the words did have their intended effect. The words of, your mother slew them as much as I did. She's already, the first time she sees the bodies, thinks, I did this. And when he says she is as guilty as I am, she again thinks, this is on me. I caused this.
And of course, this is also intensified by the fact that she thinks that if this news reaches King's Landing before Jaime Lannister does, that this actually might be Sansa's death warrant as well.
Yes. Yeah.
But, I mean, her thoughts aren't great here because she's also seeing the parallels to her own sons. As far as she knows, Bran and Rickon were just murdered horribly by Theon's men.
Right.
And now she sees these 2 young boys laid out before her, naked and bloodied from, cruel violence. They're a little bit older, but can't help but bring up images of her own sons. So
absolutely.
A horrible nightmare for Cat to witness all this. Yeah. The murdered boys' ages are a tiny bit vague, but they're something like 14 and 15. Tion, I think, is about 15. He's the 3rd son of Aemon Frey and Jenna Lannister. And Jenna Lannister is Tywin's sister.
Yes.
Yeah. Willam Lannister was 14. He was the 2nd son of Kevan Lannister, Tywin's brother, and Dorna Swift. Willam has a twin brother, Martin. And we skipped over it because it wasn't very consequential in the last chapter, but actually in the last chapter, Kevan suggested both of the twins and Tion Frey, in passing, as possible husbands for Sansa.
Right, when Tyrion was balking at the idea.
Right. Martin Lannister is also a captive of the Starks, but he was not at the Whispering Wood, and so perhaps avoided Rickard Karstark's avenging gaze, because he wasn't part of that.
That crossed my mind, because Martin was taken hostage at Oxcross.
Right.
And... maybe that fact saved his life, because what I wondered was Martin there in that chamber or in that room with the other boys?
Because you'd imagine you'd bring him back to Riverrun and throw him in the cell with Tion and Willam.
Right.
So it was
unclear.
And then which one of the twins do you murder?
Exactly. You don't know. It'd be awfully hard to tell Martin from Willam to be sure you're killing the right brother, but maybe it didn't matter to him. He was just going to kill one of the Lannister
maybe he's
boys.
Not there. That's a good point, though. It might fall under pedantry, that one.
Yeah, and a quick thing about Tion is he's the younger brother of Sir Cleos, who is with Jaime and Brienne, and Willam and Martin are the younger brothers of Lancel.
Cleos, who just plows a lonely furrow back and forth between Riverrun and King's Landing. Poor guy.
And one other thing about all these boys is that they've all been mentioned in Tyrion's exchange when he got Robb's demands, and then he gave his demands to Cleos to schlep back up to Riverrun with. He had offered Willis Manderly and Harrenhal Karstark for Willam Lannister, and the now deceased Medgar Serwyn and Donnell Locke for Tion Frey. So if these names sound familiar, it's because they've been bandied about a bit.
Was Medgar Serwyn the lord that was captured at Harrenhal that Arya thought about confiding in, but he died before she got a chance?
Yes.
Thank you.
Clay Serwyn's dead. Clay Serwyn was Bran's friend that died in the Winterfell trick by the Boltons.
Yes.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes.
Queen Jeyne Westerling, or Stark now I suppose, is not present. It occurs to Kat that she might have known the two boys because they lived not far from she lived in the Crag, they lived in Casterly Rock,
right.
Not very far apart.
Right.
They're roughly of an age, so it's definitely better that she's kept away. She doesn't seem like she's got the strongest constitution, so
Heads up
pretty
move
upsetting.
there.
Yeah. Karstark's heir Harrion is with Roose Bolton at Harrenhal, along with the majority of the Karstark foot soldiers. Robb would like to control the messaging there, but he knows that once Harrion hears this news, he's going to be an enemy for life. Brynden is hopeful that this isn't the case. I mean, if you think about Harrion Karstark, there's a couple of things. One is, he's of the North. He knows the deal. You play by the rules,
right.
And if you dishonor someone, you're going to get it.
Yeah.
And also, Brynden makes the point, he is the firstborn son, and the firstborn sons can sometimes be avaricious and want to get to their lordship sooner, and
right.
So he might be doing him a favour. We don't know Harrion's character. It sounds kind of unlikely for a northerner. It's not like Robb is grateful to the Lannisters for beheading Ned.
Well, that's, there's a lot of ways you can look at it, and one of them is that Robb is currently in a war with the Lannisters over the beheading of his father. Of course, we know Ned did nothing but what the king asked him to do, and Rickard did the exact opposite by defying the king, but that's not the story that the Lannisters let out about Ned. So is it inevitable that Harrion is going to become Robb's enemy for... Well, there's a lot of thoughts there. Like, on one hand, I think death, I guess we'll get to this when we get to this, but I don't think he had to rush into the whole executing Rickhard Karstark.
Yeah, well, that's a point. The worry for me is that the Karstark knights have already made their decision. They upped and left,
right,
as part of this, and it's like, well, you haven't actually betrayed us yet. Your lord did, and he's going to pay the price. Why are you all leaving to go chase his daughter? Well, I mean, technically chase Jaime Lannister to get to Rickard's daughter.
Right. Yeah, I just wondered if it might be worth a try to, like you said, Harrion is of the North. He knows how much honor and respect means in the North. Bring Harrion to Riverrun before you execute his father. Discuss with him, man to man. Here's what's happened. He's forced my hand. There's not a lot else I can do.
Say your goodbyes.
Right. Yeah, give him at least that opportunity.
Yeah. The other thing is perhaps a posteriori, Robb could go to Harrenhal and plead his case. Say, hey, as your king, I've come all this way to tell you how sorry I am that I had to do this,
Yeah.
There's just a possibility that might work.
Yeah. Yeah, it just feels like, it happened one day, the next morning he was executing him. That
yeah.
Could have taken a little more time to think this whole thing through. But
yeah.
But you have mentioned that Rickard Karstark had pledged his daughter's hand in a betrothal with his daughter for the person who finds Jaime. And so Alice Karstark, she's roughly 14 to 15 as well. And she was actually betrothed to Darren Hornwood before he died in the Battle of the Whispering Wood. And you remember, Danella Hornwood was the woman so many men fancied at the autumn harvest because both her husband and her son died, so the Hornwood lands were available.
And didn't she come an awful cropper at the hands of Ramsay Snow, Roose Bolton's bastard? Yes.
Yes, he forcibly married her and then left her to starve to death in a locked room.
Oh, happy times.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, Jaime caused serious chaos with his sword in the Whispering Wood. He killed Eddard and Torrin Karstark, and then he killed Darren Hornwood, who was also one of Robb's personal protectors, and possibly others. Those are the only ones I could think of. I mean, I know there were others, but he killed a lot of people. But these kids that were killed here has created a lot of chaos.
If Rickard Karstark had his way, then we'd throw Willam Lannister and Tion Frey into the number of people that Jaime killed at the Whispering.
Yes, true. Yes.
So Edmure wants to keep the news of the murders bottled up. He fears that the Lannisters, always pay their debts. But the Karstarks are already on the loose, and they didn't flee Riverrun unknowing of what had just happened. There were two things that happened. One was the murders, and second was the open season on Jaime Lannister. You get the hand of my daughter in marriage. Those two things mean that lots and lots of people are out in the world who know this news, and so this news is going to spread.
I wonder does that extend beyond the Karstark men, or is it just Karstarks, just people from Karhold and the bannermen of the Karstark, or is it any?
Don't tell Cleos Frey.
Any sap who comes across Jaime Lannister gets wins the hand of Alice Karstark. Yeah, and again, Edmure suggests this is another possibility: is making a hostage of Rickard to keep Harrion in line. Say, we're keeping your father in a tower cell. You need to stay the course here. If you really feel like he's going to become an enemy and you need that to not happen, use him as leverage.
And that rolls into a piece of pedantry that I'm not going to mention until we get to pedantry, but there is a piece of pedantry around this which I think is quite obvious, and it ties in with what you're saying there. I think that could be a worker. You keep him in a cell, you call Harrion back to Riverrun, and you tell him, you're going to be the next Lord of Karhold. You're not going to behave like your father, and bring him to heel right here and now.
Yeah.
But once again, Edmure is treated like an idiot for almost everything he utters.
He does.
But he's only trying to find the middle ground. It's Robb and Cat who are failing completely here. They're the ones who are failing, not Edmure.
Right.
One of the recent failures was because Edmure did more than he was asked to do because he wasn't included in the plan.
Yes. And that's
a failure of communication.
That's where the downward spiral really began for Robb.
Right.
Is the Battle of the Fords is what you're referring to.
Yep. And then they find fault with him for trying to find shades of grey in a situation that they've created. They've absolutely created this.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And he's doing his best. I mean, his ideas aren't very kingly or northern because they are shades of grey. The northerners work in black and white, and that's how they end up doing stupid things like getting beheaded in King's Landing.
Because they can't see the grey.
Marrying randos.
Yeah, no, that's... yes, you're absolutely right. Edmure, he's trying to think of alternatives that aren't so... I'll say Stark, really.
Very good, yes. So, I mean, the thing is, it seems like they think that dictatorship is the only way. But Edmure is looking for conciliation, and conciliation isn't necessarily weakness.
Right.
It shows intelligence to be conciliatory.
Yep, I agree.
And just on that subject, actually, I've been watching House of the Dragons, as most of us have, I'm sure, and it's kind of reaffirmed this that sense that decisiveness is always seen as a virtue in leaders in Westeros. Like King Viserys is kind of treated as a second-class king because he tries to tread the line between action and non-action, and he tries not to precipitate things. And I think I don't know if it's a George Martin thing, or if it's just this is what Westeros would be like. This is what the world is like of my creation. Or if it's George Martin saying, I prefer my leaders to be decisive and,
right,
unambiguous.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghosts Harrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes. Man, I'd make a terrible Westerosi king, I'll tell you that.
God, yeah. I wouldn't put you in the kitchens.
The amount of time.
In the haberdashery, you'd be like, well, but maybe this one.
Decisiveness has never been my strongest suit. Tenacity, that's where I excel.
But actually, just before we finish on Harry, you've made the point that you don't think he could keep the Karstark men and forgive Robb. You think that might be a step too far?
Well, that's what Robb says, is he can't openly forgive me. Like, even if he would be happy about becoming the Lord of Karhold in one stroke, he can't outwardly say, cool, I'm down with this.
But this can't, this isn't the first time in history that a liege lord has had to put to death a lesser lord.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean, you don't have to treat them like the Rains.
Yeah, take Jorah Mormont. Eddard was coming to possibly do this to Jorah Mormont for the slave trading, and the Mormonts are still strong supporters of the Starks.
Right. This is that to me is exactly right. Robb maybe needs to think about that. History says you can have fallings out with individuals from a family, and that can even lead to, execution. Doesn't mean the ties that bound the two houses together are sundered forever.
Yes, and I think maybe Robb is making too much of an assumption of how Harrenhal will react.
Yeah.
Whereas if he talked to a man-to-man, brought him to Riverrun, explained the situation and why he has to do what he has to do, you don't know. Maybe he wouldn't become his enemy.
So the whole scene here is there's downpour going on and there's thunder booming, and Cat asks herself, "Is this the sound of a kingdom falling?"
Yeah,
it feels that way.
Things certainly have gone downhill for Robb since the Battle of the Fords.
Right, exactly. That and like you said, that does feel like a turning point. There was this whole trap laid, which did not come to pass, and as a result, the Lannisters have secured themselves in King's Landing. And
secured an alliance with the second richest house,
right,
the Tyrells, and Robb's now lost, by our account. Well, Robb might not know about what's going on in Duskendale. He might not have even known that those men were sent to Duskendale, but there were about 3,000 men sent to Duskendale. He's lost the 3,000 Freys and now 300 Karstark, so he's lost as many as possibly 6,300.
Yeah, if he keeps shedding them at the current rate, they might let him through the bloody gate, because it might just be him and his mum.
Right. It would just be the immediate family. His uncles and his mom. Yeah, it doesn't seem that Robb is aware of the debacle in Duskendale, because he doesn't mention it. He's more focused on, we lost 3,000 Freys and now we've lost 300 Karstarks. But if he did know about that, this would hit even worse.
Yeah.
Because those are all Northmen that he's losing here.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say is, it looks pretty dire right now, but it looked pretty dire for the Lannisters a book ago.
Yes, it did.
And things can turn around. It doesn't, for instance, should Lysa Arryn bestir herself and bring the Knights of the Vale down to help, that would make a huge difference.
Yes, it would. It certainly would.
Yeah. The Lannisters don't behave this way, though. They are way more calculating.
Right, except for Cersei. She's the only one that has a tendency, like just last chapter when she was going to reject Mace Tyrell's request for Sansa, whether he got upset about it or not thinking through.
True.
It had to have it explained to her. But Tywin, it seems Kevin, well, though according to Tyrion, Kevin's never had a thought that Tywin hasn't had first, but Tyrion and Tywin both seem to think things through anyway.
Yeah.
And not make spur-of-the-moment decisions, which is what keeps costing the Starks here.
Right. Well, it's the spur-of-the-moment decisions coupled with the hidebound rules of honor.
Yes,
those are what really hurt. Those two things.
Yes, that the honor binds is what got Robb, and the emotional spur of the moment decision of is what got Cat.
Yeah. So, do we know the Freys are lost? I mean, we know that they've stomped off, but Cat said at the end of the last chapter that someone could salvage this. I wasn't 100% clear on what she meant then. We're no clearer. Nothing really happened in this chapter to clear that up.
Well, there was one line where Edmure said, "Even if I marry all of Lord Walder's daughters and carry his litter for him."
Oh, so if Edmure marries a Frey, then the Frey girl becomes the Lady of Riverrun.
Right, which is not the same as the Queen of the North, but it's a something.
That's looking a lot less tenable anyway, to be honest.
Right, you might want to stick to Riverrun. It's a little more tangible.
There's a chance for Riverrun.
But yeah, I mean, Robb mentions there'd been no word from the Freys on the new offer, which seems, based on Edmure's comment, seems to be proposing him as the groom to whatever bride Walder wants to offer up. But not only are they angry about losing Robb, making a Frey a queen, but now one of the Freys have been murdered. A Frey boy has been murdered under their care. So
right, but if the Freys were of a mind to listen, they would actually be appeased by the fact that the murderers were put to death, including Lord Rickard Karstark, at huge cost to the Northern Alliance.
Yes.
That would suggest to me they weren't murdering Freys for the heck of it. This was something that Robb Stark firmly disagreed with and took action against. So, but of course, meanwhile, the Freys are not going to be thinking like that. They're just going to see this as one more compounding slight and insult against their family.
Yeah, that seems that fits their MO.
Yeah. So we know that Robb and Kat have been writing to Lysa to try and get her to drawn into this war, but now we hadn't heard of this plan before. There is that problem of the Northern army getting back to the north, but there is a workaround, which is to go up to the Vale and then to the north coast of that part of Westeros and take ships across to White Harbour, and then you've got around the neck.
Yep.
But the problem is you've got to get through the bloody gate to get there, and you know for a fact that the only way through the bloody gate is for it to be opened to you. And Brynden Blackfish Tully is like, they're not going to open it. She doesn't want any part of you. So,
yeah, right.
That's really unfortunate. And to a certain extent, I understand Lysa. I mean, if you think of Lysa's mindset, she's not going to invite an army into the Vale, no matter how weakened.
Yeah, I get it. I do understand her not wanting to be drawn into this war, but the ask is so minimal. Just open the bloody gate and let us take some ships to White Harbor. I mean, this is her family, not like her family like the Starks and Karstarks are family, but this is like her nuclear family, her sister, her brother, her uncle, her nephew, her father. It feels especially callous to turn her back on them in this situation right here.
I'm pretty sure Edmure and Hoster are not leaving Riverrun to go on this folly.
Edmure's way too smart for that.
Right,
I'm tired of you guys diminishing my ideas.
Exactly.
The one thing we'll have to see is if will Littlefinger's influence on Lysa and the politics in the Vale change things at all.
Yeah. I mean, the point of him going there is to bring the Vale onto the side of the Lannisters. But we do know, I think he has a preference for Cat over Lysa.
It seems he just seems fond of Cat,
Yeah, and so he's always playing his own game.
Even though he lied to her about the dagger, he just seems like, maybe he would consider at least letting them through on the down low. I guess you can't really let an army through somewhere on a down low. So.
Right. but of course, the one area where that could work is the Knights of the Vale are seen as very honourable and straight-laced. And if it's just possible that they might let them in without checking with Lysa. If they check with Lysa, they'll be told no. But if the Starks came and said, look, we just want to pass through, they might open the gate as well. These are our allies. Let's let them through. But of course, if they did do that, they would no longer be neutral.
True. Yes. But what are the Lannisters going to do about that? They can't get through the Bloody Gate either without being let through. So
True enough.
They'd eventually have to forgive them unless they took their own ships, the Red Wine fleet, and sailed it up to the Vale. I guess they could get around the Bloody Gate that way, possibly. But also, like you mentioned, the Knights of the Vale have this reputation, and you wonder, might the other Vale lords be looking to get into this fight on the side? I mean, Ned was the ward and somewhat son-like figure to their Lord Jon Arryn, and their lady Lysa Arryn. This is Riverrun is her home kingdom, and these are her people.
Yeah, but the problem is, I think the same thing works against it, because they are honourable. They're going to do what their lady says, and she says no.
Yeah,
she says we're not getting involved, and it's very unfortunate, because I'm sure many of them would be chafing at that, but I think they'll abide by what she says.
That's what I mean. I guess is there's very possible that many of them want to get involved, especially considering that Jaime was given the title of Warden of the East instead of Robert Arryn. There's a lot of slight in that they put a Lannister over them. But
and of course, Littlefinger coming back, because that's one of the things Littlefinger is bringing back, right? The Warden of the East will come back to Robert Arryn. That's obviously a big offer for doing nothing. You know,
right.
Stayed behind the Bloody Gate, but just now you're on our side.
Right. So Jeyne comes to Cat for advice on helping Robb through this tough time. She mentions that he has spent hours writing a letter only to burn it when he's finished. And I guess the first question is, who would he have been writing a letter to? Maybe it's his personal journal. His diary, Dear Diary.
You're right, true.
Starlog, date.
There's lots of guesswork going on about what's in letters.
There really is. There's a few.
And this one got burned. It's not going anywhere.
Right.
Dear Santa.
It could have been a letter to Roose about the Karstark treason, but then why burn that? You know?
Actually, that's a pretty good guess, I think, because the wording of that, especially if you're trying to get Harry to stay the course, would have to be just so, and you can imagine just not knowing how to put it the right way.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And maybe he was writing a conciliatory letter to Tywin, thinking, I've got to make peace. And then,
oh, yeah.
No, I cannot do that. I can't do that. Or maybe he's writing another letter to Lysa, to his aunt, saying, for the love of Pete, please just let me through the door. That's all I need.
I just want to come visit, bringing my 8,000 friends.
But the other detail that she mentions is after he burnt the letter, he spent the rest of the time looking at maps. And I thought, well, what's he doing that for? So possibly gauging the possibility of victory. Then maybe that leads to the letter to Tywin. And then he burned it and he's restudying the map looking for alternative options.
Or it was to Lysa and now he's thinking about alternative routes home.
Right. Yeah. So, anyway.
Speculate away, everyone.
Right.
For the second time, Kat points out Jeyne's got good hips. And because of my sporadic visits to the Discord server, I know a little bit about this. Jeyne's hips.
I know it's one of the biggest slip-ups in this whole story.
But you know what? I think it's not a slip-up. I mean, this is a future spoiler, so we can't really talk about it yet. But I don't think it's a slip-up. We'll get there. We'll get there eventually. But I'm very excited about that particular piece of gossip.
Right.
But Jeyne has good childbearing hips.
Right.
Look forward to her spitting out twins Edmure and Brandon.
Yeah, and that's Kat's advice. Kat's advice to her is do nothing and wait for him to come around and get pregnant. But so she points out, Jeyne, when I say she, points out that her mother, Lady Sybil Westerling, is trying to help this along, trying to help her get pregnant by giving her basically this posset, I think she calls it. And so if we remember back to last week, Tywin was so confident that Robb would not have children with his Frey wife because he married Jeyne. But he was also so confident that, when Tyrion said, mine and Sansa's kids will be heir to nothing if Robb has kids with Jeyne, he was so confident that that was not going to happen and that it was going to be Tyrion and Sansa's kids that would sweep in and become Lord of Winterfell. So if we infer from Tywin what we did last chapter, then we kind of were thinking there was a lot of evidence to support that Sybil, Jeyne's mother, was actually in cahoots with Tywin. And
to prevent issue.
Yes, so
a tansy posset.
Boom. Yes. So maybe the answer lies in Jeyne's answer to Kat when she mentions, I'm trying, and my mother said the same thing about me getting pregnant, and she's giving me this posset of herbs and stuff to make me fertile. Could it possibly be moon tea, or otherwise known as tansy tea, which would be somewhat really good timing for this to happen here in front of Hoster Tully in his chamber, while Hoster's laid there dying and begging for forgiveness for Tansy.
Oh.
So,
I tell you what, Mackelly, not only is that good speculation, but that is also very good writing. To bring all those together in Hoster's chamber is really good, yeah. I like what you've done, and I like what George Martin has done there too. Very nice. Perfect ending. All right, do you have some background for us?
I do. So, let's talk a little bit about House Karstark, shall we? Their seat is Karhold, and it's kind of on a little forested peninsula in the northeast part of the north. It's about equal latitudinally to Deepwood Motte, but on the opposite side of the kingdom. Deepwood Motte's on the west, Karhold's on the east. Only Last Hearth appears to be further north of the major northern houses. And Karhold is just south of the Bay of Seals. The castle is separated from the narrow sea to the east by an area known as the Grey Cliffs. And the Karstark sigil is a white sunburst on black, and their motto is the Son of Winter. Now, I'm gonna give a little bit of information that Kat kind of gave us in this chapter because we hadn't discussed it in this episode. So Rickhard mentions that, and Kat's thoughts further provide info on the fact that the Starks and Karstarks are in fact related. The Karstarks are descendants from Catelyn Stark, who was a younger son from Winterfell, and possibly somewhere around 700 BC, Catelyn put down a rebel lord, and for his efforts, he was given those lands in that northeast peninsula. He originally called the castle Carl's Hold, but before long, folks started calling it Karhold, and as a century slipped by, the Karhold Starks simply became the Karstarks. There have been plenty of Stark and Karstark marriages over the years. These include Margaret Karstark, who was wed to Bernard Karstark. He was the uncle of Cragen Stark, and he was the that uncle, Bernard, was reluctant to give up his regency when Cregan came of age. Reminded me of that story you were talking about, the king who held his nephews captive.
Yes.
And there was also Lasara Karstark. She was wed to Alice Karstark, not the Alice Karstark that is the daughter of Rickhard Karstark, but Alice Karstark married Lord Brandon Stark, and he was one of Cregan's sons. And then Lasara Karstark was wed to Alice's grandson, Artos Karstark. So there's a lot of intermingling between the Starks and the Karstarks here. And Artos was actually mentioned in a Bran chapter as having a statue in the crypts of Winterfell, although he was never a lord of Winterfell. And finally, Rickard mentions that during Robert's rebellion, he rallied to the Stark call for banners, fighting in the Battle of the Trident. So some of that was mentioned in this chapter, some of that was other information.
That's the point of background. We expand on what was mentioned in the chapter. I mean, what was mentioned in the chapter was not germane to the narrative. It was
right.
Perfect for the background.
Yes.
I'm glad with the way we did that. So, comparison with the television show, this is all very much captured up to and including the beheading by Robb of Rickard Karstark. There's some controversy in the TV show that he was actually using ice, which didn't make any sense because ice was not returned. Ice wasn't returned in the book, and it wasn't returned in the TV show either. But certainly it is a great sword, whereas in the book it was an axe he used in the book.
Yes, right.
Which makes a lot more sense, actually. It's a much better tool for the job, especially if you don't have a Valyrian sword hanging around. All of this was predated in the TV show by a scene where Cat prevented Rickard Karstark from murdering Jeyne himself. Rickard tried to murder Jeyne, and Cat stopped that from happening. Oh. And then that scene sort of precipitated her releasing Jeyne. So it kind of, the TV show gave her a little bit more of a free pass, if you think about it, because she's like, if we keep him prisoner, eventually Rickard Karstark is going to murder him, and that's the end for Sansa. I free him and send him back to King's Landing, I might get Sansa back.
Yeah, which is somewhat kind of what I mentioned earlier, that I feel like Rickard was going to find a way to kill Jeyne if they kept him captive.
Right,
yeah.
And the TV show made it more obvious. I mean, like, he basically tried to kill him. The whole thing, I've mentioned before, Riverrun, we almost never see the interior of Riverrun. It's all sort of army camp outside Riverrun, and we do also, I think, I couldn't find this scene, but I'm pretty sure I remember the two boys actually getting murdered. We see that, so
okay,
gruesome and horrible. Maybe I just dreamt it, but horrible anyway.
Well,
so pedantry. So my thought for pedantry. So segueing again into what you said about bring Harry into Riverrun and discuss holding Rickard in the meantime. Nobody mentioned the Night's Watch.
I agree. Yes,
it's
right.
Absolutely the right solution here. I mean, it's a noble profession for Rickard's final days. It prevents the Karstarks from hating you. Nobody thought of it.
No,
even Edmure. Even
Edmure, the always thinking Edmure didn't come up with that one. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Harrion would expect that Robb would have to do something.
Right.
He can't just have his people running around killing people.
Right.
So, yeah, that would have been a decent alternative.
And then Harrion can go visit him on holidays, you know?
Right. And they're of the North. They should have thought of that.
Do you know what the Night's Watch needs? It needs good fighting men.
Yes, and good leaders.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like it.
That was mine.
Well, so I just kept thinking this in the chapter as I was going through it. Kat only thinks of Sansa when thinking of her captive children with the Lannisters.
What was funny was that I was just doing it there too, but that's because I know Arya isn't there.
Right, she doesn't. She doesn't know that. She mentions, will they lay Sansa down naked in front of the Iron Throne after they kill her when she's looking at the bodies of the boys? And then when Edmure says that the Lannisters always pay their debts, she digs her nails into her hand and thinks, Sansa. But
no word has reached her of Arya's absence, right?
Right, and that's not how...
Well, actually, let's be fair. I believe we've heard her think, and we've heard no word of Arya. So she's been concerned about where
that's
Arya
true.
is.
That's true. But she doesn't know, you know.
She doesn't know, exactly. So if I were her and all the awful things she's going through, I would cling to the fact that Arya and Sansa are together and happy and safe in King's Landing.
Or at least Arya's in a cell somewhere separate from Sansa. That they're both there.
Sell for that. Probably better to keep them separated, honestly.
And there were 2 boys. So it's not like there was one boy and she was thinking of just one kid. There was 2 boys. So, yeah, that was something I just thought odd. And then the other thing I have here about killing men is they make a big deal about how it needs to be Robb's hand that swings, or in this case, the axe. And that's the honorable thing. It should never be comfortable. It should never be easy killing people. Yeah. But when he goes off to talk with Brendan and Edmure and Cat, he flippantly tells the Great John to kill those other men. And yeah, they're not lords, so yes, to them they might not be that big of a deal to Robb, but they're still sentencing these men to death. And that was pretty easy. He just said, "Yeah, kill them, all 5 of them, 4 of them, how many there were."
I mean, character decision. We're not supposed to call that pedantry, but yes, it's a good point.
That's true. It is a character decision. Yes, I just feel like it's a little. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit with the big deal they make about it.
Right. I mean, in this situation, he is taking care of the number 1 of these guys. But it does feel like, well, that should be part of the point here. If you have to execute 8 men, you should really think about whether or not you want to do that. Whether you got the arm strength. It's a lot of work. He was exhausted after Rickard.
What made me think of it was the one man who makes a plea to him that he was just the watcher, and he says, "Hang him last." He likes to he was just watching, and I thought, well, he said that pretty flippantly, and then I was like, oh wait, shouldn't he be
supposed to not be? Yeah.
So
news and notes.
So since the Battle of the Whispering Woods is brought up in this chapter, I found this bit that was skipped from episode 81, chapter 7, Cat 1 of A Clash of Kings.
Okay, thank God. I've been worried about this absence. These 83 episodes, I've been worrying if we'd ever apologize for this.
It was from a listener named Angela that was mentioned on our Facebook page. And she was listening to Cat 10 of A Game of Thrones. And she said she had to stop washing dishes to correspond with us. And this is what she said. You guys are discussing the snow shrikes, which are birds, chattering so far south. Do you remember in the Battle of the Whispering Wood, Cat was hearing these snow shrikes, which are birds only found in the north.
Yep.
And we were wondering why they would be so far south, these northern birds. And she says it's because they were the Northern Army. She read this part as the bird calls were done as an inconspicuous way by the men to signal everyone to get ready to start. And she thought there was something similar done later on in the books, but personally I can't recall, but that's very possible.
Well, Angela's good at this. She should take my place. That's really excellent. Although, I will say, to the ornithologically inclined, if I were the Northern Army should learn some bird calls from other parts of the realm, because it actually might give them away.
Right.
Because one of James' men might be like, the hell is that snow shrike doing? That's a...
Attack!
No, that's a really good observation, and I'm absolutely sure that's right. That's what was going on. It's a coded whistle. Yeah, it's beautiful.
It fits.
Sure. Earlier this week, George Martin did a live stream interview with writer David Anthony Durham to celebrate his and Elio and Linda's release of Rise of the Dragon. As often the case, the discussion turned toward when Winds of Winter might be finished. Here's what George Martin had to say. It's finished! No.
Yay!
It continues to get longer and longer. I mean, I was working on it the day before I flew back here for 3 or 4 days. Are we supposed to feel sympathy? We work 5 days a week and then we do this the rest of the time.
Right.
I was rereading some chapters that I'd written earlier and I didn't like them well enough, so I kind of ripped them apart and rewrote them. He added, is probably going to be a larger book than any of the previous volumes in the series. A Dance with Dragons and A Storm of Swords are the two largest books of the series. They were about 1,500 manuscript pages. I think this one is going to be longer than that by the time I finish it, and I'm about 3/4 of the way done, maybe. But that's not 100% done, so I have to continue to work on it. He anticipates the day after Winds of Winter is released that he'll be asked when A Dream of Spring is going to be ready, and to be fair to us, we've got reason to ask that question.
So 3/4 of the way. That's progress, I guess.
It doesn't feel like progress. It feels to me like he should be 100% of the way and just making finishing touches at this point.
Yeah, that would be ideal.
I don't know what it is with our favourite authors, Mackelly.
I know. You warned me about Rothfuss. You said don't start it because he hasn't finished, and I thought, I'll start it. He'll probably finish it by the time I finish. That was
I won't spend a decade pining. Wait. Now I have.
Yeah. And one final bit of news. A planned community in San Antonio has taken on a very Westeros-like feel to it. Community Archer Oaks, developed by Chesmar Homes back in 2020, has some unique street names, including Aria Way, Needle Creek, Winterfell, and of course, Westeros Path. So, I looked it up. I did a Google Maps search. The community seems to be a rectangle. So there's like 4 streets. So each of those streets dead end into another, the other.
There's no way in or out of this place.
Right. That one is called like Archer Oaks Drive or something like that.
Well, I mean, it's cool. I mean, in my neighborhood, the streets are named after universities, but it's always good to do something interesting. And actually, not far away, we have famous authors, which is kind of
true.
Nice.
Yes.
But I like this. It'd be fun to live in a Winterfell street. That'd be cool.
It would. Yeah.
All right, let's conclude. So the Northern Alliance crumbles around our ears. The Freys are gone. The Karstarks are going to follow. Robb's inherited Nedness continues to handcuff him.
Yeah, Rickard said his final words, in fact, were, "Kill me and be cursed," because kingslaying is seen as a major sin in Westeros, as anywhere, but especially here in Westeros, as that's where the story takes place. But it's starting to feel like maybe Robb is already cursed because things just are not going his way.
No, it's true. It's true. It was an awful spot for Robb. Rickard had fought by his side. Willam and Tion were enemies, and now he's had to kill Rickard on behalf of those enemies. War's a mess. It always is, and don't make snap decisions from the heart, Robb.
Right.
Everyone but Edmure.
That certainly would help a bit, wouldn't it? And so Maester Vyman, he's talking about Hoster, to Cat, and he says this is a battle he can't win. It's time for him to lay down his sword and shield and yield, meaning, just accept dying. Cat wonders if it's her father that he's referring to, or her son that he might be speaking of.
Yeah.
And
we sort of grazed over that, but yeah, it was a telling moment. Obviously he literally was talking about her father, but
the words could apply as well.
The words definitely apply to Robb in this moment of time. But how do you lay down your sword and shield? I mean, you've lost Winterfell at the moment. You don't have a home to go to. You could bend the knee to the Lannisters. They might actually forgive, given all the atrocities they've perpetrated against your family.
Right.
They could conceivably forgive.
The problem is they're in so much of a weaker position now than they were earlier, and the Lannisters don't need to consider it. They might, just to bring the realm back to peace, but they don't need to at this moment. They've got the upper hand. And Tywin's fully aware of the vulnerable spot that's Robb's in. He knows that Robb can't get back home because the Ironborn have Catelyn, and that he's losing allies fast. So,
yeah. And they've lost Jaime, which was their biggest bargaining chip. He's gone, he's in the wind. Of course, Tywin doesn't know that yet, but that is the truth. That's the truth that we know.
Right. Maybe they can make peace, and the letter will get there the same day that Jaime does. Yeah. And they'll be like, look at that! Look how fast we work. But, this also, we were saying, Kat, she was singularly focused on Sansa but we know that Sansa's the only one that's in the Red Keep. But what about Sansa?
Kat's reading the books with us. She's listening to the podcast.
That's her better option right there. Is possibly that wedding dress of Sansa's going to become a funeral shroud?
And is Jeyne going to provide an heir for Robb, or is she never going to provide an heir for Robb because her mum's making sure of that?
Yeah, and should Kat be suspicious of that posset? I mean, Kat parsed out the whole Tansy mystery based on simply her father saying, "Forgive me, Tansy." And she knows how much the Westerlings stand to lose by this marriage, so...
And she knows that Grey Wind doesn't like them.
Right.
But, flip side of that, maybe she doesn't want them to succeed. Maybe she would like this somehow to get annulled and free him up to marry someone else, and the lack of an heir might actually be helpful in that case.
Yeah. She could always just ask Maester Vyman to inspect the posset, whatever it's called. Yeah.
Okay, there's 3 ways that you can help us. You could leave us a positive review. There's no better way to spread the word. You could buy some merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com, or buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostharrenhal. Become a sustainer at the Lord Paramount or Knight of the Realm level, and you'll get the episodes out day early and ad-free, and lots of other nice perks.
That's right. And, of course, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com. But you can also go out and follow us on Twitter at @GhostHarrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.